So I think I should first apologize for, on behalf of the entire media fraternity for not giving accurate and significant coverage to mental health issues. When we talk about mental health issues, I'll just give an idea how a newsroom functions, okay? There are reporters, and every reporter covers a specific beat. So there are crime reporters, there are health reporters, there are BMC reporters, civic reporters. So the crime reporter would in the evening come and would just say, "Do suicide hai." That's how we talk, okay? That's how insensitive the newsroom is to the concept of suicide. I'm saying this not because I want to be bitchy about my colleagues, but I am trying to say this about because that's how the business functions, right? So it would say, "Do suicide hai, ek rape hai," things like that. That's how things are talked about in the newsroom. So the first thing that we need to understand is, where are newspaper reporters, where are journalists coming from? These are people who are investigating real life happenings. They've gone to the station, they've gone to the police station, and they've got information about a man jumping from the ceiling. For him, the most important thing is to collect the information as much as possible and report about it in an accurate fashion without sensationalizing it, and ensuring that the reader gets as much as information as possible. But this is a learning cycle, this is a learning process. What happens is, while writing about it, when I think in 2009-10 there were a lot of suicides that happened post the 12th standard examination. So, and what happened is, everyone started doing it, and we started writing about it. And health reporters, which I was a health reporter, so I know that I was asked to take एक psychiatrist का quote ले लो इसके ऊपर. So ये suicide हुआ है, and at the end there would be one small quote. Maybe we would call Dr. Shetty and ask, "Sir, why do you think this happens?" And Shetty sir would explain us that this is what is happening. Parents are putting probably undue pressure. Children are, having high expectations out of themselves. We need to have screening. We need to have counseling. We need to have access to mental health care issues. And that would be just 2 lines of that 300-word article. So only 10 words would be dedicated to the concept of access to mental health issues. And probably if our editor was generous enough, he would give us a box where we could, put the number of the helpline, of a suicide prevention helpline. So that is where I come from. It's extremely difficult to fight for space in newspapers. Now, I've never worked in television channels, but their challenges are different. Now, when they are covering when they go to the police station, and when they are they are taking information about the man who jumped the ceiling, their first instinct is CCTV footage chahiye. So because they want to dramatize the entire thing. They want to say that this time the car went here, then the car stopped, then the man jumped. And this is what is a problem. The problem is that when you start giving accurate details, you are actually giving information to probably a person who is very vulnerable to do the same act. Now this comes after a long time. When you are in the act of reporting, you are a part of it. You don't realize when you write it, when you finish it. After I've spent some 8-9 years into journalism, and now when I write something, I think about that, what does this line imply for my reader? Will they end up abusing it? That's very, very important. So I think for this, WHO has some guidelines which I'll talk about. I thought there will be more media students, so probably we could explain that better. But to get an accurate idea about, say, like the blue whale thing that happened. Now that happened because it's more sexy. Let's talk about blue whale. Everyone was excited. If you talk about suicide, it goes on front page because of some reason. But blue whale made it to the front pages on the top because it was sexy. Editors like sexy things. Everyone wants to, I was in the train the other day, and there were some 5 teachers who were discussing blue whale and making fun about it. They weren't getting together and discussing about how serious this issue is. Because it sounded like, okay, children are playing these games and suddenly this idiot child is committing suicide. But no one was thinking why there are so many children in the country, right? Why this particular children are doing it? Probably they are vulnerable. They already have an underlying mental health issue which no one is talking about. So I think when we talk about media coverage, I have apologized, but I would like to blame all of you for this. The mistake is because you as readers, newspapers are writing for readers. There is a letters to editor column. How many of you have actually ever written to the editor? Yes. So this is a good audience, but still not all of us, right? Because you guys are involved with media, probably that's why you've done it, but most people would not think of doing it. And that is our mistake, The problem, the perception of the editor comes from his reporters or his background on what he, what particular section of the society he belongs to, he moves into. So our responsibility as laymen, as readers, is to keep on telling the editor that, you reported that suicide, but probably you were wrong by doing that, because this caused copycat syndrome. This caused more people to commit suicide. You reported about a case where someone overdosed on pills, and you gave the name of the pill, because it's in the FIR copy, it's in the charge sheet. But was it integral, was it important for the reporter to give out the name of the pills? Because then the children or any other person who's reading it would know, okay, if I take this pill, I can commit suicide. So these are small things which reporters have to ensure that they don't make mistakes. And I think it is a reporter's duty also as to explain to their editors and, convince them that mental health issues require significant coverage. I would like to say that most newspapers that you read, Times of India, I worked in Hindustan Times for 4.5 years, I worked with Midday, I worked with Free Press Journal. We have never been able to cover anything on mental health issues, because the editor would say, there is no audience, people don't want to read about it. So why don't we as readers, as a group of people, make sure that newspapers, because traditional media is still very powerful. I understand blogs have their own power, so Facebook posts have power, but when someone reads something in the Times of India, they really take it as, like a Bible thing, they make sure that what they're reading is very, very accurate, and like, maine Times mein padha tha. So when Times of India writes something on mental health issues, so I remember a case which we all had covered, all health journalists, about postpartum depression. A woman in KM hospital had thrown girl child. She had twins, and then she threw one of the child, and she acted as if nothing had happened, and there was CCTV footage. So obviously the TV media got very excited because there was CCTV footage, and we also covered it. But along with the story, we did one story about postpartum depression. Why does it happen? What are the signs? And the best thing is that there was a lot of support for the mother. People didn't criminalize her, or people did not shift the burden of, put the blame on her, because the coverage was very positive in a particular sense. So that is the power of the pen that we were talking about, that if you ensure that the writings are informed, are accurate, and also you are talking to the right people. I see a lot of articles, on social media specifically, 5 food that can get you off depression, 10 exercises to do. So I think we all have to also understand the kind of news that we are consuming. When we read something on social media, we have to ensure, is it coming from the right source? Why don't you go back to the link and check whether this is a particular coverage, or is it some company trying to sell a particular probiotic to you by just, putting it into this kind of space. So ensure that everything that you read, you have a feedback for it. You write to the editor, very, very important, and also not believing that everything that comes in the newspaper is true. I think rational thinking is very important, and every time you read something, you should have questions about it, and questioning the authority on questioning the facts is essential, and don't limit it to Twitter and Facebook. Go beyond that. And like Dr. Harish Shetty does it, I'm sure. Yeah, he questions it. He says, okay, the blue whale thing is actually a kind of over glamorous journalism. You're trying to portray something which is very small. You're connecting every suicide with blue whale. Now everything for the next 1 month or 2 months will all be connected to blue whale, because it has a quotient to it. People are going to read about it. So that's very, very essential. Now, just to conclude on this very important thing, we all as reporters have to avoid language of sensationalism. We have to ensure that we don't give information that is going to help a vulnerable person to commit or attempt suicide. We have to ensure that we give prominent space to mental health issues. writing about suicide is not going to drive people to commit suicide. You know, as sir clearly mentioned, asking someone, are you depressed, not going to make the person depressed. It is going to start a conversation. Similarly, newspapers, and for that, I think the community is very important. I think a lot of you are future psychologists, and you have to ensure that why don't you bring up these cases to the notice of media, that, you know, we are seeing a trend of lot of housewives attempting suicide because of demonetization. You know, things like that. There are things that are happening, that there were women during demonetization who did not have any money, or who had saved money in 500 and 1000, and they've lost all of that because of the act. And maybe if you're seeing such cases, we can create awareness and help them out in some way. So I think it's a two-way street. I think the media and the civil society and psychiatrists, psychologists, students, all of us have to get together to make sure what are the prominent issues. I think what is happening right now is that issues are getting buried into a lot of sensationalism, because we don't have any real issues to deal with. We think blue whale is sexy. Why don't we give our editors even something more sexy? Why don't we tell our editors? Why don't we as journalists and you as civil society come together and create a space for mental health issues like suicide, postpartum depression, stress. You know, we're talking about stress so much nowadays. All these things need to get coverage, and that will only happen when we talk about it. There's something very important that was brought about, was diabetes, hypertension. We write about this all the time, but we never say that this also has a psychological consequence. So I think that is very important. There is a need for sensitization of media. There's a need for sensitization of doctors, because they also find it very difficult to communicate with reporters. I think there are very few doctors who would communicate openly with reporters and explain them what is happening. So I think we need more doctors who can call up the reporter and say, you know, this blue whale thing is bullshit. Why are we reporting about this? We need that kind of support and a kind of feedback mechanism which needs to be put in place. With this, I end this conversation. Thank you so much.